At 80 years old, Pattie Boyd is no longer holding back about the life she once lived in the shadow of fame. For decades, she was seen as the radiant muse of two of rock's most celebrated men. Her beauty was captured forever in songs like Something and Layla. But behind the glamour and romance, there was a reality far darker than the world ever imagined. In her own words, the story is no longer one of inspiration. It is one of betrayal, humiliation, and pain, the model who became a muse. Pattie Boyd's story began far from the stage lights of London's rock scene. Born Patricia Ann Boyd on March 17, 1944 in Somerset, England, she grew up as the eldest of four children in a family marked by instability and constant change. Her father's Royal Air Force service took the family to Nairobi, Kenya, before her parents divorced in 1952. Her mother remarried soon after, moving the children back to England. By the early 1960s, Pattie was a teenager in London, restless and searching for her place in the world. Her first job was hardly glamorous. She worked as a shampoo girl at Elizabeth Arden's salon. But everything changed when a photographer's assistant noticed her striking potential. Very soon she was gracing the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Vanity Fair. With her wide eyes, long hair, and delicate features, Boyd became one of the most defining faces of the swinging 60s. Designers like Ossie Clark named collections after her. Her style, bohemian yet modern, set trends that shaped the entire decade. But her career wasn't only about fashion. In 1964, Boyd landed a tiny role as a schoolgirl in the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night. A small part, but one that changed her life forever. On set, she met George Harrison, the Beatles' quiet and reserved lead guitarist. Their attraction was immediate. By January 21, 1966, they were married. Harrison adored her. He wrote timeless songs like Something and For You Blue in her honor. Frank Sinatra even called Something the greatest love song of the last 50 years. Yet even during those early years, cracks in their relationship began to show. Harrison's growing obsession with Indian spirituality and his eventual infidelities left Boyd feeling isolated and unseen. She had given up modeling at his request, hoping to strengthen their marriage. Instead, she found herself trapped in the role of a housewife. That longing for affection and validation would eventually pull her toward another man, George's close friend Eric Clapton. Clapton's obsession and the birth of Layla. Eric Clapton first crossed paths with Pattie Boyd in the mid-1960s, moving in the same elite circles of London's rock and fashion scene. By then, Clapton had already built a reputation as one of the most gifted guitarists of his generation. After stints with the Yardbirds and later John Mayall's Bluesbreakers, his virtuosity earned him the nickname Slowhand. In 1966, he co-founded Cream, one of rock's very first supergroups. Their heavy blues sound pushed him to global fame, but while Clapton's career was soaring, his private life was consumed by a fixation he couldn't escape. Despite his deep friendship with George Harrison, Clapton had fallen hopelessly in love with Boyd, and his feelings weren't exactly a secret. Friends like Bobby Whitlock later recalled how Clapton spoke endlessly about her, tormented by the fact she was married to another man, his closest friend, no less. In 1969, the obsession spilled into the open. Boyd received a letter from an anonymous admirer signed only with the initial E. The note was desperate, filled with longing. For nothing more than pleasures past, I would sacrifice my family, my God, and my very existence. If you want me, take me. I am yours. If you don't, please break the spell that binds me. Years later, Boyd admitted the intensity of his words left her shaken to the core, confused, flattered, but still married to George. At the time, she chose loyalty and told her husband what was happening. Clapton's anguish only deepened. His unrequited love soon spilled into music. In 1970, he released his masterpiece Layla and other assorted love songs. Inspired by the Persian tale of Layla and Majnun, Clapton poured his suffering into the track Layla, a searing confession of passion and despair. The song was raw, emotional, unmistakably directed at Boyd. It was both a cry for help and a declaration of love, broadcast to the entire world. Boyd later admitted the song broke her resolve. The realization that I had inspired such passion and creativity, I couldn't resist any longer, she confessed. By the early 1970s, her marriage to Harrison was already cracking under the weight of infidelity and distance. Clapton's relentless devotion was impossible to ignore. What began as a dangerous temptation soon became one of rock history's most infamous love triangles. The collapse of Harrison's marriage and Clapton's pursuit. By the early 70s, George Harrison's marriage to Pattie Boyd was unraveling. What had begun as a fairy tale union celebrated in the glow of Beatlemania was corroded by distance, betrayals, and clashing priorities. Harrison's immersion in Eastern spirituality, once something that bound them together, grew into a lifestyle that often excluded Boyd. He spent long stretches in India, devoted to meditation and the Hare Krishna movement, while she was left feeling increasingly sidelined. Boyd later admitted she had begun to feel invisible, trapped in the role of the beautiful wife while longing for something more in her own life. Adding to her isolation were Harrison's affairs. She described him as a hot-blooded boy who enjoyed the constant attention of women drawn to his fame. Flirtations that once seemed harmless escalated into blatant infidelity. The most devastating blow came when she discovered Harrison's affair with Maureen Starkey, the wife of his bandmate Ringo Starr. Boyd recalled the humiliation of finding Maureen at Friar Park, their estate, casually lying on a mattress while George dismissed her presence with indifference. That was the breaking point, a wound that, by her own admission, never fully healed. Meanwhile, Clapton's pursuit became impossible to ignore. In 1970, he confronted Harrison directly, declaring, "I have to tell you, man, I'm in love with your wife." An extraordinary moment, one guitarist confessing to another about his love for the woman they both adored. Harrison, usually soft-spoken, reacted with a mix of resignation and sarcasm, as though acknowledging a truth he could no longer control. The tension even spilled into music. Actor John Hurt later described witnessing what he called a guitar duel at Friar Park, a jam session where Harrison and Clapton expressed their anger, rivalry, and frustration through their instruments. While Boyd later insisted the story was exaggerated, she admitted the emotions were real. "They were boymen," she said. George's irritation only really came out when he was playing guitar with Eric. By 1974, Boyd could no longer ignore reality. Her marriage to Harrison had become intolerable, a hollow shell eroded by neglect and betrayal. She left him that year, closing the chapter on nearly a decade as the wife of a Beatle. But freedom didn't bring peace. Instead, it ushered in a new and equally turbulent storm. Clapton was waiting, and his demons were about to consume them both. Marriage to Clapton, passion, addiction, and betrayal. When Pattie Boyd finally separated from George Harrison in 1974, it seemed inevitable that she and Eric Clapton would become a couple. For years, he had pursued her relentlessly through letters, songs, and public declarations. In 1977, after her divorce from Harrison was finalized, Boyd and Clapton began openly dating. 2 years later, on March 27, 1979, they married in Tucson, Arizona. Even George Harrison attended the wedding, jokingly referring to Clapton as "my husband." To the outside world, this strange arrangement looked like proof that friendship and love had somehow survived betrayal. For a brief time, their marriage seemed like the grand romance that had finally found its resolution. But behind the smiles, the reality was far darker. Clapton was still in the grip of substance abuse. Years of heroin addiction had left scars, and though he had managed to quit, alcohol quickly replaced it. His drinking binges and erratic behavior poisoned the relationship. Boyd later revealed that his violent mood swings, fueled by alcohol, left her living in constant uncertainty. What should have been a stable, fulfilling marriage became another cage, this time one of emotional chaos. There were other struggles too. Clapton longed for children, and Boyd desperately wanted to give him a family. They turned to in vitro fertilization, but each attempt ended in heartbreak. Boyd described the treatments as humiliating and emotionally draining. Each failure left her devastated. And while she was enduring the silent grief of infertility, Clapton betrayed her in the most painful way possible. In 1985, she discovered he had fathered a daughter, Ruth, with recording studio manager Yvonne Kelly. The betrayal cut deeply, especially because Boyd had been suffering through failed IVF at the time, but worse was yet to come. Just a year later, Clapton fathered another child, Connor, with Italian actress Lori Del Santo, all while still married to Boyd. For Pattie, the discovery was like a dagger in the heart. She admitted she felt mocked by fate, struggling to have children with the man she loved, while he was fathering them with other women in secret. By the mid-1980s, the marriage was collapsing under the combined weight of addiction, infidelity, and broken dreams. Boyd finally left Clapton in 1987. Their divorce was finalized in 1989. Looking back, she described the experience as devastating. "I had lost my sense of self," she admitted. "I was no longer Mrs. Famous George or Mrs. Famous Eric. Who was I? I was no one." Life after Clapton, rediscovery through art and writing. When Pattie Boyd walked away from Eric Clapton in 1987, she wasn't just leaving a marriage. She was stepping into a battle to rediscover who she really was, after decades of being defined by others. For more than 20 years, she had lived in the shadows of two of the most celebrated musicians of all time. First as the wife of a Beatle, then as the muse of a guitar god. She had been praised, idolized, even sung about, but rarely seen for who she truly was. Now divorced from both, Boyd set out to reclaim her identity. She turned to therapy, trying to untangle the web of betrayal, neglect, and pain that had defined her life. She admitted openly that her sense of self-worth had been shattered. The constant comparisons to the endless stream of women in Harrison's life, and later to Clapton's mistresses, had left scars. Healing came slowly, but part of that healing came through creativity. Photography, once a private passion, became her salvation. Boyd began documenting the world around her with a sharp personal eye, shaped by her years in the heart of rock and roll. Her photographs were intimate, authentic, deeply personal, not just capturing famous faces, but also her own journey of survival. Over time, her work gained recognition. Exhibitions in London and abroad showcased her ability to tell stories through images. Slowly, she began to emerge as an artist in her own right, no longer defined only as a muse. Writing also became a tool of liberation. In 2007, Boyd released her memoir Wonderful Tonight, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Me. The book became an international bestseller, praised for its honesty and rawness. For the first time, she told the world what it had really been like to live with two of rock's biggest icons, the infidelities, the loneliness, the pain, and the rare moments of true connection. Her candid revelations shocked fans who had long idolized her marriages. But the memoir wasn't just an exposé. It was a way for her to reclaim her voice after decades of silence. By the time Pattie Boyd entered her 70s, she had finally found a sense of balance outside the myths of rock and roll. In 2015, she married Rod Weston, a property developer she had known for years, in a quiet ceremony at Chelsea Old Town Hall. Unlike her earlier marriages, this one wasn't built on fame, obsession, or chaos. It was grounded in companionship, peace, and mutual respect. After decades of being remembered as the muse, Boyd was writing her own story. She had stepped away from the role of inspiration and claimed her place as a survivor, an artist, and a woman who had endured more than most ever realized. Legacy at 80, the untold truth revealed. Now, at 80 years old, Pattie Boyd speaks with a clarity that only comes from surviving decades of pain, passion, and disillusionment. The glamour of being a rock muse has long since faded, replaced by the sobering truth of what those years really cost her. She has admitted openly that life with Eric Clapton was not the romantic fantasy the public imagined. It was a cycle of addiction, betrayal, and emotional neglect. The man who once declared he would sacrifice everything for her love ended up breaking her trust in the cruelest ways. While she suffered through failed IVF treatments and the crushing weight of infertility, Clapton was secretly fathering children with other women. Boyd has described those discoveries as a stab to the heart, a betrayal that mocked her deepest wounds. But her revelations aren't about pity, they're about reclaiming her voice. By speaking out through interviews, exhibitions, and her memoir, she has refused to be remembered only as a face behind someone else's music. She has stripped away the myths that once painted her life as glamorous and reminded the world that behind Layla and Wonderful Tonight was a woman enduring heartbreak, humiliation, and loneliness, and yet there is resilience in her story. Despite the betrayals and disappointments, Boyd rebuilt her life. She found stability with her third husband, Rod Weston. She continues to be celebrated for her photography, her memoir, and her influence on culture. At 80, she no longer stands as a muse defined by others. She stands as a survivor, one who has finally revealed her truth, unfiltered, painful, and necessary. So, what do you think about Pattie Boyd's shocking revelations about her life with Eric Clapton? Do you believe she was treated unfairly, or was she simply swept up in the storm of fame and ego? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss what's coming next.